Thomas Jefferson's love life. Was he a hypocrite about Sally Hemings? Here are 3 books that I recommend reference in this video. The former 3rd President of the United States, Thomas Jefferson. There are no known portraits of Thomas Jefferson's wife. Jefferson married Martha Wells Skelton, a wealthy widow, when he was 29 years old. Together they had 6 children, but only 2 lived to adulthood. Martha died in 1782 at the age of 33, leaving Jefferson devastated. Jefferson promised her he would never marry again, and he kept that vow for the rest of his life. A quote from Jefferson in 1782 says, "My dear Martha, my life has been embittered by the loss of your presence." Jefferson then threw himself into his work after her death, partly to distract from grief. In 1784, Jefferson went to Paris as U.S. Minister to France. Jefferson went to Paris as ambassador, bringing his daughter, Martha Patsy. Thomas Jefferson asked for a servant, and Sally Hemings, an enslaved teenager from Monticello, was chosen. Paris had laws that could have freed Sally if she wanted to stay. But Sally returned with Jefferson, likely because he promised her, quote-unquote, extraordinary privileges. A quote from the book by Wiencek, mentioned at the beginning of this video, says, "Sally was in a land where freedom was a step away, yet her path led back to Monticello." In 1789, Sally Hemings' relationship with Jefferson shows evidence suggesting that Jefferson began a extrual, and I have to speak in code on this channel, we keep it PG over here, an extrual relationship with Hemings in Paris. Sally was about 16 years old at the time of her relationship with Thomas Jefferson, and Thomas Jefferson was 46 years old, which some would consider in addition to grape. Their relationship has been described as everything from love to exploitation, depending on your perspective. But you have to question, is love possible when you're being controlled and forced into slavery? Later DNA evidence confirmed that Jefferson fathered at least some of Sally's children. Some say 6 children. This creates a contradiction. Jefferson was the author of liberty, meaning the Declaration of Independence, yet he enslaved and had children with a woman who had no freedom. And here is an article showing proof that DNA has been successfully completed to prove that Thomas Jefferson, once again, the former 3rd President of the United States, fathered children with his slave, Sally Hemings. It says Jefferson fathered slave's last child, but actually he fathered more than her last child, but at the time, that's what this article proved. They did the DNA evidence on the last child. So you can go back and read this article. I will include a link to this article in the description box. In the 1790s, Thomas Jefferson speaks against interracial relationships. In his book called Notes on the State of Virginia, written in 1785, Jefferson wrote, quote, "The amalgamation of whites and blacks produces a degradation to which no lover of his country can innocently consent," unquote. He condemned interracial marriage publicly while privately fathering children with Sally Hemings. Now, keep in mind also, the father determines the seed of the child as far as what lineage that child is. So if a child's father is white, regardless of what lineage that the mother comes from, then that child would be under the lineage of the father, i.e., the race of the father. So, for example, if a father is white and the mother is Chinese, then all those children would be considered white, even though they have a Chinese mother. So just keep that in mind as well. Here are pictures of Jefferson's children. I thought this was an interesting clip to include. And also keep in mind that historians call that quote that I just read about Thomas Jefferson from his notes book that he wrote, "The amalgamation of whites and blacks produces a degradation to which no lover of his country can innocently consent." Historians call this quote one of the most blatant hypocrisies in U.S. history. Brodie writes, the Jefferson quote, and this is a quote from Brodie, author named Brodie, "The Jefferson Hemings story forces us to confront the gap between Jefferson's public words and his private world." In the year 1802, a scandal breaks. In 1802, journalist James T. Callender accused Jefferson of keeping Hemings as his mistress. Callender wrote, "It is well known that the man whom it delighteth the people to honor keeps as his concubine one of his own slaves." And this on the screen is showing the actual article written by journalist James T. Callender. Jefferson never publicly denied it, but he also never addressed it directly. This silence has been seen as both political strategy and a way to avoid humiliating his family. The scandal haunted him for the rest of his presidency. And you can read on the screen there more clearly the actual wording, because the original was, the image was too dark. So here is the information close up. Pause the video and take your time to read. From 1801 to 1809, Jefferson as president and Monticello's private life. While leading the country, Jefferson's private life at Monticello was carefully hidden. Sally was not a field laborer. She lived in better quarters closer to Jefferson's rooms. Their children received lighter duties and privileges not given to most enslaved people. And here's a picture of their son named Madison. His father is Thomas Jefferson, and his mother is Sally Hemings. Thomas Jefferson did not treat his children from his wife the same as he did his children from Sally Hemings. You can read this information on the screen as a quote of how they were treated. And yes, all of this while being a founding father of the United States of America. So the public life that you see is often different from the private life. There are many movies written about the relationship between Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings, and this is one of them. You might want to check this out. 1826, Jefferson's death and Sally Hemings' later years. Jefferson died on July 4th, 1826, exactly 50 years after the Declaration of Independence. That is quite ironic that he died on July 4th. The Declaration of Independence that Thomas Jefferson signed indicates We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. But did you actually believe that, Thomas Jefferson? Did you actually put that into practice? Not only in your public life, but in your private life. Let me know in the comments section what you think about that. If he actually believed what he wrote. 2 sons eventually passed into white society, escaping slavery forever. Brodie describes, quote, "The Jefferson Hemings children walked a line between bondage and freedom, neither wholly of one world nor the other." Jefferson's double life is striking, a president preaching equality while practicing inequality at home, with his own children and Sally Hemings. Here is a list of Thomas Jefferson's slaves at Monticello. Hypocrisy or human complexity. Jefferson wrote the words, "All men are created equal," but he enslaved more than 600 people in his lifetime. Was Thomas Jefferson a hypocrite, or do you really believe that he loved Sally Hemings? As Wiencek wrote, the contradiction in Jefferson's life are not footnotes, they are the story itself. Here is a book that I recommend you read, Jefferson's Sons, A Founding Father's Secret Children, here by Kimberly Brubacher Bradley. If you get a chance to read this book, let me know what you think in the comments section. Despite decades with Sally, Thomas Jefferson never legally freed Sally Hemings in his will. She was later allowed to live as a free woman in Charlottesville, where she died in 1835. Sally Hemings' children, however, lived as what would be called free people, quote unquote, leaving behind Jefferson's what was considered to be a mixed race of descendants. And this reality forces us to rethink the quote unquote pure image of Thomas Jefferson often taught in schools. So let me know what you think of Thomas Jefferson's image after watching this video. That is the question. Do you think that Thomas Jefferson loved Sally Hemings? Or was this just another form of slavery's cruel power and wicked control? And let me know what you think about Thomas Jefferson's image. Do you think highly of Thomas Jefferson, or do you think that he is a hypocrite? Let me know in the comments section. I thank you for listening, and I thank you for watching. If you haven't already, click like and subscribe. Remember, know your history.